All right, good evening, and welcome to the LYNX Silverline virtual public meeting. Tonight, we're here to provide you, the community members, an update on the project as part of our fourth round of public engagement. Tonight will consist of a presentation followed by a Q&A. To submit a question, please sign into your Google or YouTube account and type your question in the comment box. But to get us started tonight, before we dive into the presentation, I'd love to welcome CAST CEO, Mr. John Lewis, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Julianne, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to officially say welcome to our fourth round of public engagement for the LYNX Silverline refinements. Over the past year and a half, our team at CATS has worked closely with you, the community, to refine this future light rail alignment. While we're nearing the end of this point in the process, it is critically important that we continue to receive input, ideas, questions, and concerns from you, the public. Tonight, we have some important updates to share with you. The project team will present 5 additional refinements to the current locally preferred alternative. They will also share some early concepts on project phasing. We're at a critical phase of our pre-project development, and I urge each and every one of you joining us tonight to take a few minutes to provide feedback on our work thus far. The project team will explain how you can provide feedback during the presentation. With that, I'd like to introduce our project manager, Andy Matthe, to get us started with the presentation. Andy?
Thank you, John, and thank you, public, for joining us tonight for our fourth round. Very happy to be giving you some updates and also some status of some ongoing work, as we head towards another refined LPA through the Metropolitan Transit Commission. So I'm just going to step right into it. So just as a couple meeting notes for technology based on our lessons learned from our last round of public meeting. Panelists, please remain on mute until the Q&A portion of the meeting. Participants, please log into your Gmail or YouTube account to participate in the live Q&A at the end of the meeting. Log off any organizational VPNs for best quality streaming, and post questions in the chat box to be answered at the end of the meeting. I'd always like to take a minute to introduce our great team. We have myself, Andy Matthe, the Senior Project Manager, Jenna Nichols, the Deputy Project Manager, Julianne Sheldon, who's our Manager of Community Relations, John Howard's our LYNX Silverline TOD Project Manager, and Jason Lawrence is our Silverline Rail Trail Project Manager. So the purpose of the meeting is to kind of give an update of the Silverline, where we are, some proposed refinements, an adjustment of proposals, some proposals for some phasing strategies, and to do some live Q&A. And just before we zoom into the details, I'd like to zoom out and kind of talk about the big picture. Really, the Silverline is one piece of a big puzzle, which is looking to solve for mobility issues along the entire length of the Silverline, including Belmont, City of Charlotte, Town of Matthews, Town of Stallings, Town of Indian Trail. And so we work closely with all the planning and transportation agencies within those boundaries to really kind of seek the best solutions to get people around where they need to be and create the best outcomes possible. Just as an overview of the adopted refined locally preferred alternative from April of this year. So we are a 29-mile light rail alignment, which goes from the town of Belmont to Indian Trail. That includes 29 stations and a maintenance facility. So just to give a kind of an overview of kind of the project life cycle, the steps that we need to take between now and opening day, it's kind of good to give folks an understanding for how long it takes these projects to proceed. So when you think back to planning, or the left side of the project life cycle, I mean, that's been going on for 20 years of discussion of Independence Boulevard or Wilkinson Boulevard. So there's a lot of history and planning that led us to this point. Over the last 18 months, we've been building towards or in part of pre-project development, which is really the process of getting ready to enter project development. That included NEPA scoping, or National Environmental Policy Act scoping. It's an environmental process that we have to go through. It will include 15 and 30% design, and we anticipate a draft environmental impact statement as part of this. But once we're ready and complete those steps, we'll then enter into what's called project development, which is really the first official federal step that we'll be taking to move us towards into the funding pipeline. Part of that we'll be doing 65% plans, really kind of refining those plans down a lot more. And that process is really mandated to be complete in 2 years. So you really need to be prepared to enter project development so you can be sure that you can be done in the 2 years, or you have to start over, which we certainly don't want to do. So it's critically important to get our ducks in a row in the pre-project development phase, so we're ready to enter project development phase and can be completed on time. After that, we then would enter into project engineering. That would include the final plans, the final nuts and bolts, the writing of the specifications, getting into some of the issues of real estate and a full funding grant agreement, which is our funding mechanism through our federal partners. That would all happen at that time. That takes about 1 to 3 years, depending on the scope of the project. As far as construction goes, that would be somewhere between 5 and 8 years, depending on the size of the project. Just as a note, the Blue Line extension, which was about a little over 9 miles, took about 5 years in construction to build. So there's just a frame of reference for you. And then we would get into operations and revenue service. So where we are right now in that pre-project development phase is, we've completed the early scoping. We've gone through and have an adopted LPA through the Metropolitan Transit Commission. We've gone through an exhaustive process of evaluating different alignments and putting forward recommendations, working with all the stakeholders and the public along the alignment. And we've identified a lot of TOD opportunities through our TOD project. So where we're going now is really proceeding with our preliminary design, really getting a little more detailed into what the alignments and what the stations, how station access will work, and how the vertical profiles of the light rail, a little bit more in the details, and also to do some environmental field work. So we'll be out sending people out to evaluate certain environmental conditions in the field. Folks on the call might have received letters. We sent quite a few letters out over the last couple of weeks, and we've been getting calls. So people are receiving the letters, and it's really just a notice that we're going to have crews out in the field working to identify if there's any environmental concerns along the alignment. So before we get into the refinements that we're evaluating, we just kind of want to take a step back and kind of discuss and present how we are thinking about the alignment choices that we've made over the last 18 months and how we look at things moving forward with these refinements. So we look at these things as a kind of an evaluation and balance of benefits and risks. So we want to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. So we want to make sure that we have good travel time benefits, good ridership benefits, good local connectivity so people can get to our stations as well as get a reliable trip. And we want to make sure that we have good development opportunities around our stations. But we want to balance that with an evaluation of costs. So we want to make sure that we're putting forward the most cost-effective project possible to make sure that we're cognizant of any environmental concerns, and we're making sure that we're well coordinated with others, all while having a foundation of public engagement to make sure that we're keeping in tune with the public's thoughts. And so just as a note, this is kind of an internal kind of framework for how we look at some of these decisions. If we have two options in front of us, if the least benefit option is also if the most benefit option is also the least risk option, then that's an easy decision. That's the one we usually go with. However, if those two things aren't the same, then we have to evaluate, are the risks manageable given the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the risks? So that's just kind of an internal way that we use to think about things and document our preliminary decisions. So just to kind of get into some of the refinements that we're proposing, and we have 5 tonight to discuss. The first one is about it's a relatively minor adjustment in a station location. It's a shift of a station from Suttle Avenue to Berryhill Road. So just a note, the alignment of the station that was adopted in April of this year is over here near Suttle Avenue. We see with the red X. and we're proposing to shift that alignment over to near Moorhead Street. And really the reason for that is about access. And we, at this point of Wilkinson Boulevard, is really kind of turning into a limited access freeway section as people start to ramp up to get into 277 or 77. So the opportunities for pedestrians across Wilkinson Boulevard, very limited, very uncomfortable, even if we could do it. And we have evaluated different options such as building pedestrian bridges and other things, but really to get to the station from Wesley Heights or from other communities would be very challenging. So with that, we feel like the better alternative is to really shift that station to Moorhead Street so that folks could cross more comfortably at a traffic signal protected by a pedestrian cycle. So our proposal is to shift the station from Suttle Avenue to Moorhead to facilitate better pedestrian access. The next refinement is about adding a new station. And that station is near what's Summit Avenue. This station was something that was previously evaluated, and there are some significant access issues related to this station as well. And that was one of the reasons that we previously proposed to remove it, because the access was very limited. There's a railroad adjacent to it. There's an interchange directly adjacent to it that may be rebuilt or reconstructed in the future. There's certainly a lot of other roadway improvements that are being evaluated as part of adjacent private development. So the access is very challenging at this point. However, we have received some public feedback from the folks in Wilmore and the Gold District that there would be benefits to keeping it so we can provide better service to those communities. And so what we're proposing is to add it back and continue working with all the stakeholders in the area, including NCDOT and the private development groups who are working in this area to figure out if we can come up with an access plan to actually get people to the station. So at this point, we're proposing to add this back and keep working with the folks along the corridor to see if we can come up with some access solutions. And if we can't come up with access solutions in the future, this station may have to be reevaluated in the future as we move forward. The next potential refinement is another potential station, and this is the one in First Ward. This station is something that's been discussed with the public through our focused engagement over the summer, and it's also been a lot of discussion through the TOD teams about the benefits of a potential station here. And some of those benefits are there's some economic development benefits, but there's also quality of access for some of the folks in Garden District and First Ward. So we feel like there are some benefits that can be provided from both the development and an access perspective. There definitely are trade-offs. So this would be an aerial station, and so it would be more expensive than a normal station. It would also slow down the overall runtime. So adding a station would slow down your service. So there's kind of an operational impact and operational risk and a cost risk associated with it. But we feel like the benefits from a development and from a access perspective kind of outweigh those issues. Kind of as a note, here's a visualization of what the station could look like. We have Caldwell Street, the Brookshire Freeway. You see some existing residential along 11th Street in the Garden District, and this would be our station, which would be on the 277 or Brookshire Freeway side of 11th Street. So this would be an aerial station with vertical circulation on either side. And we would have folks crossing 11th Street at signalized intersections, both at Davidson and Caldwell. We did have some at our public meetings with the folks in First Ward and Garden District. There was some definitely support for the idea. There was certainly concerns about the noise and lighting and some things that happen with stations, and I think that's something we'll keep working through as we get further into design and keep reaching out to the public and getting their feedback on. And then the fourth potential refinement is an alignment proposed refinement, and it's really about shifting an alignment away from an existing structure. And this is about shifting the alignment towards Fugate Avenue to avoid the Golden Green Hotel. So this shows the purple line shows the alignment We're bridging over 74, coming into Bojangles for a station behind the Bowplex to serve special events and potential development opportunities. And then the previously adopted alignment came through here, and then it had a direct impact on the Golden Green Hotel. And so when we started getting into looking at what that impact might mean, we started to have conversations with the business owner and with potential redevelopers of the site who are evaluating whether it could be redeveloped into some affordable housing opportunity, which clearly sits within the city's goals at this point. We felt like that there was definitely a benefit to avoiding the alignment. There's also a significant cost savings towards avoiding the acquisition and demolition of a very large hotel. So we feel like that there's certainly a lower risk or lower cost, and there's also a big benefit as far as providing and enabling the opportunities to redevelop that site in the future. So with that, our proposal is to shift the alignment to avoid that hotel impact. However, it does, by moving it towards Fugate Avenue, it does move us a little closer to the neighborhood. So we've been having some conversations with the folks in that neighborhood. We feel like we'll be able to minimize those impacts to the greatest extent possible, but there certainly we will be closer to some of the residential properties on Fugate Avenue. And our fifth proposed alignment, which is our most complex one, is really about the ultimate configuration of Monroe Road. And so in this case, what we're talking about is really where is the light rail as it relates to Monroe. So the purple line was the adopted LPA from April, and actually this alignment really hasn't changed much since 2016, whenever the alignment was first added into Monroe Road. And so the assumption at the time was that it would be median running, just like North Tryon Street, if people are familiar with what the blue line looks like on North Tryon Street. So one thing to note is that Tryon Street and Monroe Road are very different facilities, very different transportation facilities. Monroe Road is much narrower, and it doesn't have a existing median today. Well, Tryon Street was a much wider, bigger road and had a median. So it's a little easier to incorporate light rail into a wider road with a median than a narrow road without a median. So that's just a note. So when we started to look at what it might mean to include light rail into Monroe Road, really immediately started to note that, and this visualization shows kind of the existing condition along Monroe Road. So really when you start adding in what it takes to rebuild Monroe Road, add light rail into it, relocate the utilities, rebuild everyone's driveways, we started really identifying pretty quickly that the impacts are pretty great. And so we would have somewhere between 30 to 35 business relocations, which we feel like, it's quite a lot. And we would also have quite a few property acquisitions. So we'd have somewhere between 60 and 70 property transactions with people up and down the line. And also we'd be rebuilding everyone's driveways, moving all the power poles, all the congestion and disruption that would happen with a reconstruction of a road of this nature. So with that kind of thought of what that impact could be, we identified another alternative that has much of a lighter footprint. And that's what we're calling that is the rear side running option. And so that is really running the alignment back behind the first row of businesses along Monroe Road. So what that does is that allows us to keep everyone's access from Monroe Road similar or the same as it is today. It also doesn't require us to rebuild the road and relocate all the utilities up and down the alignments. And there's certainly a cost savings and a mitigation of disruption to the community for not having to do that. It also limits the amount of business relocation and real estate acquisition. So there are the disruption and the acquisitions are less. So that's always a good thing. It also provides, keeps everyone's access the same today, the business access the same, and it also provides for better and deeper properties. So in case any of these properties do decide to redevelop, or that happens naturally, the redevelopment potential is better because the depth of the properties are deeper. Also provides a better and more visible station up here at Matthews Township Parkway. So this is in the town of Matthews. So there's a station at that location is right along Monroe Road, easier to access, easier to people to see and see where to get in and out of. The previous option was kind of more set back next to the railroad because of the bridge. So with that, our alternative or our proposal is to move forward with the rear side running option for public feedback and MTC approval. So next, I want to have a brief conversation about project or proposed phasing and implementation. This is our kind of our first look at some of these. So it's, you know, conceptual, but we definitely want to start having that conversation about phasing and implementation. So let's start out kind of at a high level for why do we need to do this? Why do we need to talk about phasing? Well, I think the thing to really hit home with people is that projects of this nature, they really have to compete for federal funds. So these projects have to compete against many other projects across the country who are also seeking federal funds, very limited federal funds. And it's very competitive. So we need to make sure we're putting projects forward which are going to meet the requirements to achieve that federal funding and are going to compete well against other projects. Big projects that are this expensive as one big project usually don't compete as well. Also, long implementation schedules. You know, if the bigger the project, the longer it takes to build, longer it takes to design, everything takes longer because it's just bigger and more complex. So, you know, in some of our peer reviews, you know, projects that are, you know, about 10 miles long take about 10 years to build. So it's about 1 year per mile just on average. And it's a good rule of thumb to think about. And folks remember the Blue Line extension? That was about what it took to go from where we are right now to the opening of the Blue Line extension was about 10 years and it's about 9.5 miles. So pretty close. So we want to make sure we're putting projects forward and opening projects sooner, not waiting to open this one big project, you know, over 20 years or so. Also, the nature of the Silver Line LPA is really, you know, a lot of it is outside of Mecklenburg County, and so it's outside of the MTC funding mechanism. So there will need to be some amount of phasing until such time that there's a funding arrangement and a financial commitment from those other counties to contribute towards the design and construction and operations of the Silver Line in those areas. So until that time, we're gonna move forward with a phasing scenario, assuming that you know, we're staying within the MTC and within Mecklenburg County. And there's also precedent. So we're not the first transit department or transit agency have been down this road. So, you know, there a lot of other cities have done phase implementation for a bigger picture program. That includes Denver, Seattle, Dallas, and it's really effective to manage cash flow, make sure we're implementing projects, you know, sooner instead of waiting and dragging these things out longer periods of time for escalation. So we feel like we're kind of in step with the overall industry on this sort of thing. So now that we're talking about phasing, what are the considerations? We have 29 miles. How are we thinking about phasing? What are the considerations? And one of the real things that one of the first tests we always look at when we look at the different ways that we could phase the project or where terminus might be is, does the terminus and does the phase serve a key destination? Does it have a clear purpose? Does it stand alone and compete for ridership? Is it going to be a good project in and of itself? And so we want to make sure we're putting forward phases that each one of them have a clear purpose and stand alone and will compete for federal funds in and of themselves, because every phase is going to have to do that competition. As part of that, cost effectiveness and ridership are some of the big things that we're always shooting for. So we want to make sure we're putting forward the most cost effective project that we can that has the most ridership benefit. And also, you know, we want to also put forward projects that we can implement in reasonable times. That gets into that project length and schedule. And also maintenance facilities. That's something we're starting to get into. You know, to build the Silver Line, to operate the Silver Line, we will need a new fleet of light rail vehicles. And right now, our existing maintenance facilities on the North Yard on North Brevard and South Yard on South Boulevard are at capacity and they really can't accept any more vehicles. So a new maintenance facility will be required to accept vehicles and to handle day-to-day maintenance. So any phasing scenario we come up with has to have a maintenance facility strategy tied to it. And so just to kind of jump right into it, so our initial recommendations for phasing based on those considerations we were talking about earlier is really to orient towards phase A to the southeast. That would be beginning at Charlotte Gateway Station and head towards the town of Matthews. We do have a couple different phasing termini options that we're evaluating in consultation with the town of Matthews. Regarding the option one is to make it to CPCC Levine. That would be the extent of Mecklenburg County. Option two would be downtown Matthews, something we work very closely with the town to identify where a station could be and an alignment could be. And option three would be Matthews Township Parkway, and that would be along Monroe Road. We're having these conversations with the town, so I think that's something that conversation will be going on over the next couple months. So our phase B would be to the west, and so that would be from Charlotte Gateway Station to I-485. And so that would provide good service from I-45 park and ride to the airport, down Wilkinson Boulevard to Charlotte Gateway Station, and then on to the phase A of the Silver Line. Then we also I did want to note that we do have some other phases, and with regional support required. You see these gray areas on either side of the phase A and B. That would be the extension into Belmont and Gaston County, and the extension into Union County for Stallings and Indian Trail. So we definitely are continuing those conversations with our very important stakeholders in Gaston County and Union County, and we are having conversations about potentially continuing design and coming up with partnerships to figure out ways that we can push forward extensions or maybe amending this phasing option in the future. So there's a lot of conversations still occurring. So this is our initial recommendations. So this just kind of shows just at a high level some of those recommendations and the mileage. So we have CPCC Levine is about 15 miles. So they would be the most ridership because it would be the longest, have the most stations, but it would also be the most expensive. Option two is a little bit shorter, so it's kind of steps down a little less expensive, also a little less ridership, and also Matthews Township Parkway. Some of the key things there between the three options, we would anticipate having a terminus park and ride at CPCC Levine or Matthews Township Parkway, if those are the options, the terminus options that we would choose. They're below is kind of a list of key destinations that they serve. One thing to note is the option one serves all the 4 stations and all the key areas in Matthews, which is important and an important goal for us as we move forward and as we work with the town and move forward in planning and design. Phase B would be Charlotte Gateway Station to I-45, and that would be about 7 miles. And so that would serve, of course, Charlotte Gateway Station, the airport, and I-485. So just as kind of a note, I'll just kind of quickly go through some of those phasing recommendations or terminus recommendations in the town. So option one would be CPCC Levine, and that would be everything in Mecklenburg County. And the pros there, of course, is we reach all the key destination Matthews. We hit all 4 stations. There would be ample space for a terminus park and ride and any associated facilities that might be required for operations. It is the highest cost option. And there also is, it's kind of a more limited streetway network out there. So you'd have to come up with some plans how we get customers off the interstate to get there quickly and compete against traveling on their highway. That would just have to be something we would have to sort out. Option two, downtown Matthews. So this would be a lower cost option than the CPCC Levine because it would be shorter. And we would reach downtown Matthews, which is a key goal and a key destination that we've all been working towards. But it does miss ridership opportunities and development generators at Sportsplex and CPCC Levine. So there's a missed opportunity there. And also, it'll be difficult to extend for just those 2 stations to make that cost effective in the future. So it'll be more difficult to make it to CPCC Levine, which is a very short segment. And then our other option is really to look at Matthews Township Parkway. So this would be the lowest cost option that would take us into the town of Matthews, and it would have a station right off Monroe Road. And the reason it's this lower cost, not only is it shorter, but there's a lot of structures that you have to build to get into the town of Matthews from Monroe Road. And it would have good auto access for a terminus park and ride. Some of the cons, again, it misses a lot of those development opportunities and all those ridership generators in the town, so we would only get one station in the town of Matthews. And again, it's the same sort of situation. It would be more difficult for us to extend that in the future as an independent project. So with that, I want to kind of take a minute to next steps. I'm going to hand it back to Julianne, who can kind of talk about some public engagement opportunities and input opportunities, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So where we are right now is we're doing the engagement process. We're having public meetings and neighborhood meetings with folks. Ongoing. Tonight's one of them. We're also having one tomorrow night, and ongoing opportunities meeting with folks. We're having a community meeting on Thursday night as well. And also we're having the survey is also open, and that feedback is available to the public until November 3rd. So Julianne will show you the opportunities for how you can fill out our survey and engage with our online open house. And so late this year and early 22, we'll begin the MTC process. So we'll present for information, also present the public feedback that we would get to the MTC in November. And then we'll go in January for the adoption. And all the while, we're going to be proceeding with our engineering and environmental studies associated with progressing the environmental review and the light rail design. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julianne, who will walk you through a couple slides.
All right. Of course, before we get into our Q&A, I'm going to walk through and show you exactly how you can participate in our online open house. Here you see what our website looks like. That's ridetransit.org/link Silverline. While you're on this website, we will have a live link there to participate in the survey. Should be able to show you in just one moment. I think we need to advance the slide. Can we advance the slide? There we go. And that will take you to this website here, where you can click on public meetings and participate in the online open house and in the survey. To participate in the online open house, you have until November 3rd. So you have quite a few weeks to get in there, tell your neighbors to provide us with some feedback. And of course here, if you cannot, if you don't have access to internet, you can always text Silverline to 704-461-4441 to provide any sort of comment in lieu of taking the survey. All right, so let's get into the Q&A section of tonight's virtual public meeting. If you haven't yet, log into your Gmail or YouTube account and type your questions in the chat box. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our first question.
Sorry, excuse me. There we go. Stop share. Thank you.
All right. All right, Andy. So in tonight's presentation, you walked us through the potential plan for implementation and phasing. Can you share any updated cost estimates for this phasing approach?
Yeah, so the estimates that we're looking at for our phase A, which would be, and these are based on a conceptual level of estimates, so these are certainly not a fully engineered estimate, but at a conceptual level, our phase A is from Charlotte Gateway Station the whole way to CPCC Levine. That would be option one. That would be the longest version of this, would be about $5.1 billion. So that would be the most expensive version of the option that we've looked at so far at a conceptual level. Phase B would be from Charlotte Gateway Station to I-485, and that would be about $3.1 billion. So that is our working estimate and our beginning point for our evaluation of the phasing. One thing also to note is that those estimates, I'm sorry, the estimate for phase A would be, that would be our first phase, and then we would in phase B, that would be there would be a lag on that, meaning that the phase B would be progress at a later time, so the escalation would be a little bit different, and that's why one of the reasons why phase B is that much.
All right, next question. What is the estimate for completion of the pre-project development phase?
Right. So pre-project development, that's kind of a nebulous, there's not a clear milestone for that. But so what we're shooting for is the end of the beginning of 2023, and to complete pre-project development, and then have those conversation about entering project development at that time. One thing to note though is, entering project development is a pretty big deal. So we're really going to have the funding commitments lined up before we enter project development. So entering and ending pre-project development is really kind of also tied to a lot of those funding questions that are going on out there, because we're really not going to go forward into project development without a clear funding plan.
All right, thank you. Next question comes from one of our viewers here today. What is the reasoning for the Berryhill station being on the east side of Berryhill, the Aramark property, versus the west side of Berryhill, which is currently undeveloped?
Okay, let me go into my map real quick. There we go. So one of the things is that we have so in this particular area, we have a station that's located right at Remount Road. So we wanted to keep those stations a little bit farther apart. So if we'd have moved it to the west side of Berryhill, it would have been really, really close to the other station. It really would have maybe taken us to not having the station if we were that close to the other station. So we try to keep the station spacing so that it makes sense operationally, so we don't have stations right next to each other. So that station spacing is really about, similar to that of in some of the, like say Carson to east-west, that spacing. So when we were looking at how we were going to lay out the stations, we just wanted to make sure to give ourselves a little space and be consistent with our operating schemes for the blue line. So that was kind of some of our rationale there.
Thank you, Andy. The plan or the alignment as presented shows no station at Hawthorne Street, where the new Gold Line crosses at the newly opened Gold Line. My apologies. Why not make a station there to link the two lines?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, and something we've looked at in the past. A couple things to note about Hawthorne Bridge. So we're coming out of our light rail stations need to be on flat, straight track. So they can't be on slopes. They need to be very flat and very straight. So there's very specific criteria for when how we have a station. Coming down from the railroad, the CSX, and Pecan, we're kind of on a slope as we go under Hawthorne Bridge. Hawthorne Bridge is also very narrow between the operating lanes and the abutment. So there's really not a lot of space at Hawthorne for a station. And also we have some geometric limitations that don't allow us to make that move. About as close as we can get is on top of Pecan Avenue. And one of the things we'll be talking with our rail trail team as we move forward is coming up with different approaches for how we can get people between the station at Pecan Avenue, which is a great connection to Plaza Midwood, over to the station on the Gold Line. So that connection and the importance of that connection is not lost on us, but there are certainly some limitations which drive that decision for us. But we're going to try to come up with our best approach to get people there from Pecan over.
Can you talk a little bit more about how access would be provided to the Golden Green Hotel?
So the Golden Green Hotel, as far as access between the Golden Green and the station, there would be sidewalks, and there would be potential opportunities there. If you're talking about driveway access to the Golden Green, then there would be the access from Golden Green really wouldn't change as it is today. So we would be behind the Golden Green, next to Fugate Avenue. And so if I'm not answering the question, maybe I didn't understand it, and if you could reply back in the chat, and I'll try to answer better if I understand the question a little bit.
All right, the next question. What neighborhoods will be affected by this project near Monroe Road and Village Lake?
Yeah, so coming out of or from the transition point from Independence over to Monroe Road, the idea is that we'll be coming behind the Woodbury Forest neighborhood along parallel to Summerhill Drive. So that's one neighborhood that we've been working very closely with over the last year to try to minimize those impacts. We then, after coming from behind Summerhill and Woodbury Forest, we'd be going through a number of multifamily neighborhoods. And so one thing that we know right away is that there will be residential impacts in the Village Lake area. And so we're going to do our best to try to minimize those impacts, but there certainly will be some. One thing that the TOD team has been working closely on is to try to come up with approaches for how we could improve that area once the project is done, whether that's restoration of affordable housing or coming up with some other policies. I think that's something that we're continuing to work on. Once we get down to Monroe Road, then we're crossing over Monroe and then into the property, the vacant property across the street from Monroe. Again, let me actually share my another screen. I'm looking at Virtual Charlotte, and maybe that can be, if we're going to have a lot of map questions, let me see if I can share that. Julianne, can you see the screen? So as we come through here, we'll be having a station at this area right next to Village Lake, and bridging over the lake, and then coming over Monroe Road for another station near McAlpine. Hopefully I answered the question.
All right, the next question. Can you discuss the thought process for determining the southeast route being in Phase A and Phase B being the shorter west route?
Right. Yeah, so it really, one of the things to drive it is really about ridership. So when we are looking at our ridership model, we look at projections of how many people will actually ride. And so we find that the Southeast corridor, even though it is more expensive and it's longer, there are more stations. And we feel like our ridership model shows that we have a better opportunity to collect more ridership on the Southeast corridor. So the ridership is almost twice that on the Southeast corridor as it is on the West. So right now we feel like that travel market is there. It's a stronger travel market on the Southeast course. So the benefits are higher. And so it helps outweigh some of those higher costs and those higher, the length of the project. So that was one of the driving rationales, is really the ability to come up with a project that provides good ridership that we can run through that federal process and through cost effectiveness.
All right, we've had quite a few people ask about how homes on Shenandoah Avenue will be impacted.
So there's a couple different sections of Shenandoah, but I assume this is the section that folks are talking about. So one thing to talk about is, and we've had some conversations with some of the folks out here, to make the transition over Independence along Briar Creek and then into Bojangles, there's likely to be a direct impact of many of these homes along Shenandoah Avenue. So this is something that we're not 100% sure on the real estate impacts at this point. We're really just basing it on general geometry now. And I think as we get into more design, we'll know more about what those impacts directly are, and there may be opportunities to improve it in the future. But at this point, the idea is that the Silver Line will likely not be able to avoid many of these homes along Shenandoah Drive unless we get into design and we can improve some of our geometry and mitigate that. We certainly will avoid those if possible. But right now, we feel like there's a direct risk that there could be an impact to several of those homes.
Another residential question. What residential streets will be impacted near Monroe Road?
Let me go down here. If folks can see the map. So with the alignment, it'll come across Covedale along this, and this shows the previously adopted LPA. So this is not the current alignment that we're proposing, refinement we're proposing. So it would cross Covedale at this location along the backside of these properties, across Orchard Lake twice, and then we would bridge over Sardis Road, come across for a station near Galleria, across that Galleria at grade, and then we would bridge over to the other side of Monroe Road at this point. So as far as those streets, the crossings would mostly be, from a residential street perspective, would be Orchard Lake, which has some multifamily residential, and Covedale at this location.
All right, another Monroe Road question. Will the proposed Monroe Road realignment go through the existing parking lot for the theater close to Monroe Road and Sardis Road North intersection?
Yeah, yes, our this alignment we're talking about, which would be the rear side running, would come along the front side of the parking lot, basically right in this area along the front side of that parking lot. So that would be that's what our recommended alignment is, to then would bridge over Sardis Road at that point.
All right, next question. If the terminus is at CPCC Levine, will it terminate at the campus or nearby? And what is the exact location of that proposed station?
Yeah, so if you see right here, again, this is the CPCC Levine. The campus is here. Here's the parking. Our station would be, we're kind of shooting to have that station along this pedestrian sidewalk, along this spine, to get people from the station up to the campus. So that is our proposed alignment at this point, right here, right at the station, adjacent to this parking lot, is our current proposal.
All right, and I'm doing a final scan for questions. Make sure that we have everyone here. Here's one that we didn't get to yet. The blue line was 100% a tool to increase property tax revenue, in this individual's opinion, ensuring that only the wealthy can live near the line. What's being done to avoid repeating that here? Andy, are you able to elaborate at all on the considerations that we're making?
Yeah, and maybe, I know that there's something that we really have been conscious of, and that's not a first time we've heard that criticism. And maybe let me pass over to John, who's done a lot more work on this than we have on the engineering team. So John, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Give you a little break here. You've been doing a great job with the presentation. That's a good question. On Blue Line, we did not really consider proactively affordable housing as far as the implementation tool for the rail corridor. So a lesson learned with Silver Line is that we've got our TOD study that we're close to complete on, and we've had a number of meetings throughout the year. We have an online survey now with some recommendations from our summer meetings. So one of our goals is to, again, as Andy stated earlier, is to look at potential strategies, opportunities to provide affordable housing around our stations proactively instead of reactively. One of the good things, though, about Blue Line is we are getting more affordable housing units on the north corridor, especially over 200 units, either under construction or constructed, and a few more coming on the blue line. So, but again, for Silver Line, just looking at planning history, we're trying to be more proactive this go around on Silver Line. And we have our housing services partners on our team as well to help us craft those strategies and policies so that we can think about housing around our stations sooner than later.
Thanks for that, John. All right, we're going to do, depending on how long this takes, one, maybe two more questions, and then I'll ask Andy to pull up the slide with all of our contact information so that if we didn't get to your question, we can absolutely respond to you individually. All right, question is, what about residences on Unaka Avenue near the Walmart? Will those homes be impacted, or will the light rail be behind those properties?
I think the citizen's talking about the area, the Walmart near Almar Road. There's actually 3 Walmarts that were near, so or actually 4 Walmarts were near. So I'm Unaka, there you go. So yeah, we're talking. Sorry about that. I was trying to orient myself to which Walmart we're talking about. So the Unaka Road is at this location. So in this area, this is near Albemarle Road and Independence Boulevard. So we'll be coming through in this area and building a bridge, building a light rail bridge through this area to get to a station near Sharon Amity. So we're currently evaluating network improvements in this area. So you know, I don't think at this point we know enough to know what the scope of those residential impacts are going to be. So we're going to be evaluating that moving forward. And my gut based on some initial looks is that we don't think there's going to be too many direct impacts along Unaka, but there could be residential impacts other places in the neighborhood that are near there. So I think as we proceed with design, we'll know more about what those impacts might be into particular properties. And that's one thing I wanted to note. I know there's a lot of questions about real estate, and I usually try to give like kind of a little primer to how real estate's going to work on the project, because everyone gets very concerned and excited. So we're very far away from knowing what the property needs of this project are at this point. We just have a general idea or a general corridor for what those areas be. That's why when people ask me specific questions about property, it's very difficult for me to answer because we haven't fully designed the project. And we'll be coming up with ways to try to improve our geometry and our footprint so we could minimize them. But there will be real estate impacts 100% on this project. But we don't know exactly what those are at this point. So the steps that we have to take to really get our heads around that is that we have to, progress our design, move forward with our design so we really understand that a lot more. And we also have to complete the environmental process before we can start acquiring property. Once we progress our design to a point in which we understand what those right-of-way impacts are going to be, and we complete our environmental assessment or analysis, which will tell us kind of the impacts of the project, then we'll be reaching out to people to make offers on what their property will be doing an appraisal and making an offer to properties that we feel like that we deem that are necessary. And then there's opportunity within the process to have a discussion about value and the property owner's opinion of value versus our opinion of value. So there is a process that we will absolutely have to follow, and that we will follow, and we have a lot of experience with that from the Blue Line and Blue Line extension. But I wanted to kind of give that primer. I'd say we're probably 4 years away from really having really beginning to start talking about the actual acquisition of property. So we're a bit away from that. So I wanted to give people a little bit of understanding of that, because we always get a lot of real estate questions, and I think it's good for people to understand the process and the timing for that.
Thank you for that elaborate answer, Andy. And yes, of course, if you look in the chat, there's quite a few very specific questions about very specific geographies. So thank you for providing that level of detail. So in the interest of time, it looks like we only have about 5 minutes left. Andy, can I ask you to share our contact slide?
Yes, I will. If I can figure out how to do it. Okay, there we go.
All right, excellent. Well, at this point, I ask everyone to write down this information. And if you choose to not write it down, please visit ridetransit.org/LYNX Silverline, where we have all of these forms of communication listed as well. A reminder that our survey period, our online open house, is available now through November 3rd. You can text to respond to the survey by texting Silverline to 704-461-4441. To provide a general comment or to ask a more specific question, like something related to neighborhood impact, please email lynxsilverline@publicinput.com. You can also call CAT's customer service at 704-336-RIDE or provide your comments via voicemail at that number listed there, 704-461-4441 with the code 6636. And of course, we will accept hard copy mail. So you would just mail that to Charlotte Area Transit System, care of myself, Julianne Sheldon, at 600 East 4th Street. And as mentioned before, if we didn't get to your specific question this evening, please email that to us and one of our team members will get back to you as soon as possible. And with that, we'll wrap up. I thank the project team for being here, Andy, and thanks to all of our community members for participating. And we look forward to engaging with you again here in the short future.